first real like what the hell moment was when N-Dubz sold out the O2 Arena. The whole tour was sold out, and I just had a memory of us being at the under 18s nights and then going to having full-on production, lighting, dancers, pyros, CO2 bursts, merchandise. To experience that at like up close and personal, and to see every step along the way of that, I remember being so moved.
You get to work with some incredible people like Elton John, Olivia Dean. I mean, fuck, Olivia Dean. You know,
yeah, she's amazing.
Talent. As an A&R, how much does someone's social media presence affect your decision making over an artist?
I joined Ben Mortimer's team on the A&R side, and we found an amazing young lady called Stefflon Don.
Do you think music managers should be more policed and held accountable in that manner?
Also, the chasing status stuff as well last year.
Yeah,
that was wild. Getting into Baladan, and then just looking back at how important that moment was.
Right, Rich, welcome to the Blind Talent Music Industry podcast. Look, we're not going to mess around. We're going to get straight into it, okay? So, first question, hot off. When did you first fall in love with music?
I fell in love with music at a very, very early age. The first person I ever saw doing music was Michael Jackson in a music video. And I remember in my pajamas trying to replicate him and trying to do spins and trying to sort of like watching one of his music videos and thinking that looks so cool. Hopefully one day I'd love to be a part of whatever that is. Sort of. I have no concept of what the business was or a pathway in or anything else, but I just love the idea of somebody having that much fun doing something which looked pretty superhuman to me, and feeling like that could be an amazing thing to do if all my stars lined up.
Nice. What video was it?
There was a video of him with his brothers doing a Jackson 5. It was a Jackson 5. I think I'll Be There, one of those sort of songs, and they all did choreography at the same time. And Michael Jackson was the smallest out of the brothers, and I remember his confidence just jumped out of the television and his projection. And I remember just thinking, my God, this person he's not human. He's just like captivating. Everything was really slick. The music looked good. The choreography was tight, and I remember thinking to myself, I'd love to be in a place where I'm a part of something in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, what a way to start your journey when you kind of Jackson, right? I mean, whatever anyone thinks about Jackson doesn't matter, right? That he was a pop star.
For me, he was a pop superstar. He was somebody that encompassed everything you'd want to be as a professional artist.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And as someone that came up, my early days was just watching music videos. I was obsessed with music videos. If you remember the box, music television, You Control, that was my obsession. And Michael Jackson, I do think, regardless of anything else around that particular topic, the music videos were phenomenal, game-changing, culturally defining. Culturally defining,
creatively ambitious, like groundbreaking, like things that really pre-internet. I mean, you got to remember this pre-internet. So when your imagination thinks of things and you to actually turn that into something tangible and see it on the screen, like the work they were doing was just way ahead of their time.
Well, it's crazy how really he was viral at a time when we wouldn't necessarily think of virality in the same way that we do now. 30, 40 years later, virality almost feels like, well, that didn't exist in the early 90s. It didn't, but
it kind of did as well. The Pandemonium did.
Yeah.
Pandemonium did, like, even from the Beatles. And so there's a super fandom did.
Yeah.
And I think because of the lenses that we saw things through were so sort of limited to get to, for you to sort of see something that really works on at scale, you were limited to a few things, and the ones that were great were really great.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, what music video did then, wasn't it? It was able to scale an artist, and I guess we'll get onto that a little bit as we get into the industry side of things. So I want to know, though, what was the first track that you purchased with your own cash?
It was a cassette of Usher's My Way. Usher had like a little hat, what looked like a pair of tights on his head type thing. I remember just literally rinsing the cassettes and me being so proud of having saved some money to pay for something that I called mine.
Yeah, and it's cool, but I mean, back then you had to be careful about rinsing the cassettes because you could legitimately actually break them
down. You can literally wear them down and they would not play properly.
Yeah. The idea that you'd have to rewind a take I mean, that seems just like
I remember having a pen or pencil and like spinning it to rewind it. Just to. I'm showing my age now, but
that's all right. Look, I'm older than you, Rich. You can take that. You know, I'm far older than you are. But it's one of those moments, isn't it, when you buy that first track? It is defining. I think Usher's interesting. Obviously, you got Jackson and you've got Usher, and then you've almost got Chris Brown and you've got Jason Derulo. A lot of that's what an artist does, inspires future generations of artists.
Of
and I don't know how we'll get into that, I suppose, in a bit. So the music industry itself, Rich, right? Well, I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
What drew you to the music industry? Because it's not quite being a musician necessarily, but what is it about the music industry that drew you in?
To be a music manager per se, there isn't as much as there are degrees you can take and courses you can go on. It's one of the few businesses in the world where you haven't got to have any particular qualification to get into it. You've really got to just be trustworthy, have some good people around you, and figure it out. And I like the idea of there being a business where anybody with determination, application, and passion can thrive if they commit to doing it properly. So the music industry to me was always a place of, wow, if everything else doesn't go right and I don't get my results in college or things go left with family stuff, the music industry will always be there, and interesting characters will always find a way to wiggle through. And that's what I love the idea of that, it being literally a level playing field, flat ground where people with passion and ambition can just go and try and make something of themselves.
Yeah, and I think the industry, I mean, kind of what I heard there when you were saying that was it's a bit like the Wild West.
I was doing it in a nice way, yeah. It's the Wild West. It's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense, but at the same time, it's amazing.
Yeah. It's amazing, but you draw on a really interesting bit, and I don't want to labour on it too much, but, you said anyone can become a manager. Anyone. And that is true.
Everyone can attempt to become a manager. I should have said attempt.
But that leads me to whether or not...
To be a good manager is a whole different thing.
I found this in my own management journey, but I don't know how your management journey was. You start off and you don't really know a lot, actually, and you kind of make it up a little bit as you go along, and you try and think, oh, well, I think I would do it this way and that way. But there is no rule book. I mean, there's plenty of books now, right?
No, there are books. There's no actual rules. There are books. No. There are ways that you should do, or preferred ways, but there's no governing body like enforcing the way you do. It's like an Ofcom of the music management company.
Yeah. Do you think music managers should be more policed and held accountable in that manner?
I think... No, I don't. I don't think they should be policed. I think that's dangerous.
Police is the wrong word. Do you know what I mean? Like, in the same way, to drive a car...
Yeah, you got to have some sort of... You're
going to have some sort of license
I like
or some sort of qualification.
I like the idea of being some sort of training. I like the idea of there being some basic... When I first got into business, I was part of the MMF. I worked for Jonathan Shallett at the time, at the very start, and he was on the MMF board. And the way I learned most of the things I learned at the start was from going to MMF courses. And we did stuff where we specialised in touring, we did publishing, we looked at merchandise, we looked at day-to-day management. And I remember being really young in the business and... being basically the T-boy of the office and covering events of people who couldn't go to shows or didn't want to go to shows in the evening, and being sent to do courses every 2 or 3 months in specific areas of music, sort of thing. So I was lucky enough to have some sort of, like, I wouldn't call it professional grounding, but a place to go to try and figure out best practices. Yeah,
and shout out MMF as well, because I think... What an incredible body that do a lot of great work. Anna over there in the team, and I think the courses they hold are great foundation work. Even the networking events they do, and the little getaways they do with managers to build networks.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's necessary. I think if you said this, as much as it is the Wild West, you can find pockets of our business where there are bodies and people that are willing to sort of share knowledge and help you sort of progress in your career, and hopefully build some sort of structure within what you do. But you can do that voluntarily. There's no obligation, and I think that's the thing. You couldn't do that and do law, rightfully so, or be a doctor, rightfully so. Yeah,
but equally though, you are in control to some degree of people's lives and livelihood, and you have a responsibility there psychologically, emotionally, financially as well. So I kind of agree, and also think, I wonder if we are at that point where we could do better. But maybe that's a deep. No, I think we could do better.
It's just the magic of what we do. There's the magic of, like, it's like I compare that to sort of giving people a license to have children. There's some people who shouldn't have children.
Yeah, I agree.
But without
China, I think, tried to do this.
But I think you sort of limit what could potentially be great by doing that sometimes, because you just don't know how things are going to turn out. I grew up in a single parent family, and I was sort of always very much sort of like, if I don't go and do something for myself, I'm not going to be anything.
Yeah.
So my situation made me strong enough to move to London and pursue a music career.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have, I think if I had a different upbringing, maybe I'd be doing something else. And I'm grateful for that. So
Yeah,
I think
and look,
it's worked out better for me.
But I think if you've come from that upbringing, and I hear this a lot in the industry too, and some of my closest chums in the industry had a similar journey to ours, maybe, where we come through in, I wouldn't say broken homes, but certainly poor background,
a bit
South
of poverty,
London, council estate, makes you want it that bit harder. And I think you dream harder as well.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said about that as well. And but you build up this resilience, and look, I've seen your journey over the years. Right? I've seen some videos. I've seen your journey from different majors, whether it would be Sony, EMI, etc. Even like little jaunty all around the world, right? You know, I've seen these journeys, and I think I've always seen your journey as just nothing short of just really inspirational. Actually,
very kind, thank you.
Because I'm someone that was on the other side of the fence, right? I was the programmer. I was the guy in the video playlist meeting being served the N-Dubz video.
We were like, please help us.
Yeah.
We were the guys tap dancing to try and get you guys to support
which is
us.
never something I felt comfortable with either. I never felt comfortable with that idea of, or the illusion of power, really, let's be honest. And so I always found that really hard from the background I had, kind of suddenly being thrust into this, whatever you want kind of thing. I'm like, well, I don't want anything. I just want to be successful.
I want to do good work,
Yeah, that's all I ever wanted to do. But but seeing you from afar, I see that you come through the ranks, and you're an inspiring person. And look, and I can say this, you're an inspiring person of colour too, because the industry when I started, wasn't very well represented. It
wasn't diverse.
Straight. I come from deepest, darkest South London with a very culturally rich very privileged to say that as well, because I know that's not true if you come from Devon, right? Yeah. And I see these figures coming through, and yourself, and I see Darkest, and I see these people coming through. I'm like, yes, this is great. Yeah. This is exactly what it should be. So I've been watching your career from afar, and we've always sort of touched base.
Yeah, we always on social media. We chat,
always sort of touch base, and we kind of had some good times. And so I guess where we get to now is your journey in the industry, and you've done some cool stuff, right? So just tell us a little bit about where it actually started. When was the very start? So you talked about Jonathan Shallot there a little bit.
Well, basically,
where did it actually start?
I'll tell you where it started. I did performing arts at college, and I was doing choreography, and I was my side hustle was teaching dancing at local youth clubs and gyms to get a bit of extra cash while I was at college. And I auditioned for a tribute group that would go to the Balearic Islands and do the holiday resorts, and would cover popular boy bands of that time. So you look at Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Boys to Men. We thought we were cool. We were going to be cool R&B superstars because we enjoyed sort of like performing. So we moved. Me and some friends from Nottingham, where I'm from, we moved to Spain for a summer. We had a big white van. We had a PA system. And 5 SM58s, I think it was 55, I can't remember, the microphones. Yeah. And we would go from hotel to hotel, and we'd rehearse before we got there, and we would do everything from a cappellas to like NSYNC routines, and we would perform at hotels to hotels. And we did that for a whole summer. We enjoyed it so much that we thought when we got back to the UK, we thought that, maybe we could actually do this properly and actually be a band. We're all like 18 and 19, not much to lose. So we all we decided to try and get a record deal. We reached out to tons and tons and tons of people, got a response from 2 or 3, went down to London, did the whole a cappella tap dance routine, lovers sort of thing. Yeah. And one person said, all right, let's have a go. And so we relocated. We were just about to put our first single out, and then the company pulled the plug. Right. So it was 5 of us from the East Midlands, moved to London, and found ourselves in a situation where no family, no friends, no money, and no record deal. Right. So most of the crew moved back to Nottingham, and me and another person in the group decided we weren't leaving London until we got paid, or until we have some sort of success. Yeah. At that point, I was the person who arranged a lot of the studio sessions. I was begging producers to try and do stuff for us, and I was like winging it to try and get them to do mixes for free and negotiating like splits. And I was doing the business end whilst being a part of the group, unknowingly.
And sort of learning on the job,
just to survive, because I didn't want to leave London, and we'd managed to sort of penetrate the sort of like party scene in London a bit. So we were going like China Whites, we were doing 10 rooms. There were these old clubs that all the music.
China Whites used to be right next to our office on Winsley Street.
Of course. So we were doing all that stuff as young people in a boy band type thing, trying to get on the circuit, like begging fame, like absolutely begging fame. And we sort of, whilst doing that, I was obviously running out. I didn't have any money, so I was on what we call a dole, or new music for. Is it new music for musicians? New business for musicians. It was basically a thing that the Labour Party put in place for creatives that were seeking work while still wanting to still stay in their art. So I was going to college 2 days a week, taking benefits, and then my officer from the Dole office happened to be on the MMF.
Right.
I saw an advertisement from Jonathan Shalit looking for a new scout, and plugged me in, and I went to see Jonathan. I borrowed someone's suit, borrowed someone else's shoes, went to see Jonathan, and because I'd been in a band, I'd sort of been in the studio, I understood the process of delivering audio. I was able to wing an internship from Jonathan, and that was my sort of wiggle through. Right. When I was in my group, I was never good at singing. I was brilliant at choreography and movement and stuff, but I was never good at singing. I always knew I was never going to be an artist, because that wasn't my strength. My strength was always about making things happen for people. So once I got into Jonathan's wing and he started teaching me how to do stuff, even just invoicing, diaries, like real basic stuff, I just thought, this is it. This is my path, and I've just doubled down.
They call that serendipity, don't they? Yeah. If the guy at the Dole office was on the MMF,
I mean, you couldn't make it up. But honestly, I feel like the universe has pulled me towards it. Like,
and how did that conversation happen? Like, I'm just here to collect the check, and
because you have interviews, because they review whether you should or shouldn't.
He sees you moonwalk into the Dole office.
I'll say shaman on the way in. No. But it was. I was living in Stratford. I was in East London. Yeah, and it was quite a tough part of London at the time, and because I'm from Nottingham as well, Nottingham can be quite rough as well. So I wasn't too worried about that. But I think it's just the timing was just really good, and I just saw the window of opportunity, and I just didn't look back. I just ran for it and went for it, and luckily, I mean, thank God it worked out. But I remember working for Jonathan. I remember going to In the City, which was a really good event that used to happen in Manchester. I remember seeing N-Dubz In the City performing and thinking, oh my God, who are these kids? They're absolutely crazy. But I addictively loved them. I just think they were amazing. And they had a manager at the time, and I just literally, I literally stalked them for about 3 or 4 months. Yeah. And then when their management, who was Daffy's dad, passed away, we were it was actually Colin Barlow had done a deal with them at Polydor at the time, and we when the dad passed away, was no longer there for management. Me and Jonathan were there, and I'd already been stalking them for God knows how long, and I was a familiar face. I was at all the shows. I demonstrated a genuine sort of passion and liking for them, and they remembered that when we had the meeting at the end. So they're like, oh, you're the guy who keeps coming, like. That's how we managed to close them and start. And
did you start stalking them? Because I mean, I remember way back when they were super duper raw. Yeah. And it was Channel U. Yeah, it was just Channel U, and it was Channel U again. And I kept seeing these, and actually, I'll be straight. I thought it was kind of a joke at the beginning. It was, he had this little thing, all these little dangly things here, and you thought, I don't get it really. But I think that there's plenty of artists no one ever gets, but they make total sense at the same time. And I think they caught this incredible wave, didn't they?
They caught a pocket of the UK that hadn't been represented. Yeah. I don't want to be negative when I say council culture, but there was like a bunch of people in every town that identified with what they were, what they were being. The sort of anyone who goes JD Sports, anyone who's sort of like is sort of Middle England, quite cool, who was liked urban and black culture, but also is into pop. Yeah. So it was always very hooky, but it was always rapping in the middle, and we would deliberately go with a bigger pop record for radio, and then underneath we'd have a street record. We were constantly feeding both like culture and the masses at the same time. And they both, the band were always really open to that. And I think at the time, Dappy's dad was a member of Mungo Jerry from a while ago. And I think for a group of kids that were very sort of street savvy, they had a very keen interest in big melodic choruses. They were a big fan of Phil Collins. They were a big fan of really like all-time great 80s sort of like pop rock bands. So they understood song structure. They understood how to really write a song. And two of them were actual engineers, so they understood audio in a way most pop people probably wouldn't, sort of thing. So it was the most amazing journey for me in terms of developing a skill of A&R and understanding what that is, and getting into the fabric of songs and sort of watching them being built from demo idea through to the end.
I think they're a great example for other artists, actually, to look at a brand and how it develops over time, because you're right, it was council culture. It was kind of everything that wasn't big at that time, because it was almost because there was a lot of this got to look clean and got to look aspirational, actually. The opposite end, actually. It's all about Aguilera, and it's the other end.
It was all like big American glossy, like this was lo-fi, it was rootsy, it was dirt under the nail, like real reality of life stuff. And it was just it was a bit of a release for people, and for young people to be able to sort of, when you say aspirational, for young people to be able to identify with it earlier and think, actually I could do that sort of thing. I think they did a lot for people at the time, and in terms of black music in the UK, I think they're one of the first bands to actually commercially cross over and to displace the myth of that culture not actually doing numbers, which was the challenge. Which whenever we sort of we're bringing whether it be a rapper or anyone else into bigger major labels, the argument would be these things don't make money. They just don't, because they weren't. But
I do remember they done the O2, right? And I remember that being a moment.
It was such a moment.
Like a real
at that
moment.
time. It was just it was surreal, because we'd gone. That was within 2 years of doing under 18s nights. So they were doing literally like clubs at 6 p.m. when kids after school. You have like 28 kids there. They were all sipping on bloody tango and turning up to the show with the braces on, and Dappy singing Na Na Na, and Elisa doing hooks. So we went from under 18s nights. I think 1 year they did over 300 shows, which is when you do that, some nights you're doing 3 or 4 shows in a night in an area. So they worked their socks off. They built their fan base up from under 18s through to arena level. Didn't skip any steps. Never had any real tour support along the journey in terms of financial support from a major label. And we managed to sort of navigate that process the best way we could.
Well, look, they're an iconic group
of
UK pop culture. They are, and I don't think there's anyone that can deny that. I do remember many, many, many years later filming with Dappy fishing, because he loved fishing.
Which again, it feeds into it. It's like, what the hell? Like,
it was such a mad thing, and
it's the opposite of what you think.
And he's there, he's fishing with, I think it was Will Best. I think we had there. He's just like having a cheeky smoke, doing some fishing, and talking about Phil Collins. And it's funny you said Phil Collins, because like he was literally talking about these. And I thought you'd be saying like Dre and all of these.
No.
It's like no, like he's talking about them being like actual inspiration. Like truly,
no, he studied it.
What fueled.
He would like, because obviously a lot of the family were engineers, so they would like literally break down the harmonies. They would literally break down the textures they were using on the record, the type of mics they were using, the presets. So like they were really in like forensic.
Was Phaser a little bit underrated in there as well, wasn't he?
Big time,
because he was the producer.
He's the producer because he's a bit of more of an introvert, but he's a magician behind the production. So he could play instruments. He was a whiz with computers. It was because they were self-sufficient. We never had to go and sort of beg it with producers or big name producers at the earlier stages of it. So Phaser was an absolute, and he still is. He's a genius. He's had more platinum records than most producers have today. But again, because he was the producer guy, he was never up front that much. I think a lot of people wondered what he did, but he was just as integral as any of the other two.
Yeah, and I remember we filmed with them, and I mean we filmed with a lot of people, but we filmed with them a number of times. I remember the label was always very accommodating, because we were quite supportive, particularly once they got out of that Channel U stage, because they were definitely deliberately in an underground stage where our network really wasn't great at that side of it. But I remember filming them loads of times, and they were actually incredibly articulate and professional and knowledgeable. And I think that would always throw our producers off because they would go in the room thinking, oh,
here we go.
You know, what's he going to say now? And they'd be talking really, really intelligently about music. And I think it would throw you and go, oh, right. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Cool.
It's quite disarming. It is, yeah.
Very disarming. So let's talk about that. I mean, that's an amazing calling card and start into that side of the journey for you. And, you know, creating one of the most iconic pop acts of the last 20 years is not a bad place to start, right? Setting your bar a little bit high there, though, Rich.
Yeah, I know.
You know, where do you go from there? So tell us what happened after that. So where did you go? Yeah. So past N-Dubz onto your next stage. What happened?
I tell you, so what happened was we got we did 3 albums in 3 years. The third album comes out. I sort of like, we had a bit of success. We've done some really decent stages at festival level. And I'm at the point in my life where I wanted to settle down because I've been like full tilt for years in N-Dubz land. I'm taking calls at 4 a.m. I'm dealing with baby mothers. I'm dealing with like just stuff above and beyond a managerial sort of situation.
There's a lot of boundaries there.
There was none at all. I was so committed, and they, to be honest, I gave them as much commitment as they gave me in terms of like they were in, and I was like, I'll match it. So I was just like, everything else came second. It was just that, and I'd sort of like wanted to get married, wanted to settle down. I wanted some structure. I wanted a 9 to 5. I want to know what money I'm getting every month. As much as the commission's starting to look good now, I just needed some sort of structure so I could settle down and have a family. And I met up with David Joseph at the time, and he said, and also Matt and Chris, who ran all around the world, who were the label, were going in-house into Universal to run the catalogue department. So the timing was great. We just finished the third album. They're about to go into do solo records. Talisa's just got the job on X Factor, and I'm like, I need a normal job. So David and Matt and Chris bring me into Universal full-time as a head of A&R for All Around the World Records. So in doing that, my job was to do Talisa's solo stuff, Dappy's solo stuff, sign a few bits, and be a normal Universal employee, A&R person. So we did that. We had a bunch of hits. Talisa was on TV, so we were doing good work. I had another kid called Charlie Brown. I don't know if you remember him. We had a hit with him. That goes really well, and then I get a call out of the blue from David Joseph and a guy called Max Hull, who used to be the head of international at Universal, saying the Canadians need someone to move to Toronto to help run their A&R team. Would you be interested in it? And at the time, I'd literally just bought a house the month before. We'd just had a baby. I had an 18-month-old, and we're like, me and my wife were like, well, if we're going to do it, we probably should do it now rather than when the kids are in school. And
was that a case of money's too good to turn down?
It wasn't. The money wasn't.
I just had to ask that question because I was curious.
It actually wasn't. It was about like the experience. I wanted to do something global anyway, and for me, the money was okay. It wasn't life-changing money. It was good money, but it wasn't like, oh, let's go get. For me, I wanted to sort of plant a flag in America, in North America. I wanted to have that experience of understanding how media works there. I like the idea of running a department. And I just thought on my journey, it's a great thing to have, even if it doesn't work out, to have experienced it and come back. I figure it's probably set me up to do better work elsewhere if I have to go to another label. So we did it. We went over, had a great time. We won a Juno. We sort of I started a dance label within Universal, which still exists now. And we met some amazing people, did some good work. And then halfway through the process, the guy who hired me, decided he didn't want to do it anymore. Right. So I got a new boss through, who was a lovely guy, but we just had another baby in Canada. So I've gone there with one and then had another one. Right. And we had no support, family support at all. Right. And when you live in Canada and you work for a record label, when you go to shows, you don't jump in the car, you jump in a plane. Yeah. You go 4 hours left and you're still in the country.
That's the mad thing. We work with a couple of Canadian artists, and we don't really, because we're in the UK sometimes, it's just not quite fathomable to realise how big that damn country is.
The country is.
It's huge. Mental, from state to state.
It's just, it's mad. So I found myself away a lot, and my missus at home with a newborn and a 2-year-old, which is just, it's just not nice for any, especially with no family support. Yeah. So we kept in touch with David Joseph, and at one point he sort of said, look, I'm about to promote Tom March and Ben Mortimer. If you want, you can come back. and join Polydor.
Right.
So that's what I did. So I was like, all right, you know what? We didn't sell the house, so we had a house to come back to, and I relocated back.
Right.
And then I joined Ben Mortimer's team on the A&R side, and we found an amazing young lady called Stefflon Don, who at the time was the hottest deal in the country, and we signed her. We had a bunch of hits. It just went off. It's just great timing.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, I remember we filmed with Stefflon Don at the time, and what a force!
I mean, it was nuts.
Like
I seem to be attracted to chaos. I was like,
yeah,
you'll see a common thread. If it's tricky and scalable, I'm definitely interested.
Nice. There you go, artists, if you're listening. He's looking for tricky and scalable. Nice. But chaos and creativity and success, I think sometimes there's
a sweet spot.
There's something in that, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a junction in which they cross over. There's a little place where you can grab it.
I know, maybe not to use a Game of Thrones quote, but is chaos a ladder? Possibly. So you move into Polydor. And again, this is feeling a bit like an episode of This Is Your Life.
No.
But it's good because you're an A&R guy.
Yeah.
You're an A&R guy. Your instruments, your ears. Okay, when you were younger, your instrument is your legs, right?
Yeah.
But as you've developed your career, your instrument is clearly your ears.
Yeah.
And I think like my career was somewhat predicated on my ears and my eyes, right? I had to in some ways be an A&R in a TV land, but A&Rs for me, I think I find incredibly fascinating because of course we work with lots of artists, and some of those questions they ask are, how do I get an A&R? How do I get into a record label? How do I develop that? And I think you're going to add some really interesting droplets into what to do there. But let's fast forward a little bit into your next couple of journeys, because you get to work with some incredible people like Elton John, Olivia Dean. I mean, Olivia Dean.
Yeah, she's amazing, incredible
talent.
Incredible. And I credit with Olivia. Obviously, fast forward a few years.
Yeah,
I get asked to join EMI Records as the head of A&R through Joe Charrington, who's one of the best A&R to ever grace the country. Joe's done Sam Smith, JLS, and 5 Seconds of Summer. She's just been consistently, her and Nick Raphael, consistently successful, repeat offenders when it comes to like successful pop groups. And so when I first joined EMI, the first thing Joe plays me is an Olivia Dean record called Dive, which is basically like well before it's come out. Right. It's like my first A&R meeting with her, and she goes, "What do you think of this?" And I remember thinking, bloody hell, this is incredible. I'm like, have I heard this before? Sort of energy.
Right.
When it feels like you've heard it before, there's always a great sign.
It can go 2 ways, can't it?
It can go 2 ways.
Yeah, I can go 2 ways.
It's literally a copy of, or it's original, but it was original. And we sort of sat with it, and we just decided that we were going to have a priority. We had a few priorities, but that was like at the time that was the priority for us as a label to try and dig in on. She'd been signed to the label for 4 years. She was originally signed by an amazing A&R guy called Michael Ajayi, along with Jordan J. They both did it together. They both had left the company since. She'd been through 2 or 3 A&Rs in the sort of interim. And now Joe had come in and identified it and was like, "This is the one." And Joe was just like, "We're going to make this work."
Wow.
And she pointed the whole company at this. We're like, this is the focus.
And I think we touched there about Joe and Nick and Joe Charrington and Nick Raphael, and I think we can probably come onto those in a little bit, but because I think great A&Rs are often considered great because they get it right, and plenty of A&Rs have got it wrong. So all of them have some skeletons that are buried deep. Yeah, they all get it wrong at some point. But everyone should have signed Coldplay. I mean, the amount of times I've heard this many times. But I think we'll get on to the sort of misconceptions of A&R, because I think there's an awful lot of those, and I mean, maybe it's appropriate to talk about it now. But I think we'll get on to what you're doing right now anyway, because I think, like I say, I've seen your journey, and I've just thought, there's a guy who kind of epitomizes perseverance, drive, getting the record right, caring about the art. So I've watched a couple of your videos you've done, and it's undeniable how much you actually give a shit about what you do. I know it sounds weird to say, but it's true. It comes out. It just oozes out of you like sweat from pores, right? You can tell. Okay, we'll talk very quickly about the how you approach your role as an A&R. I think that's kind of an interesting one. Our context is obviously an industry podcast, but we want to just try and get into how you work, because I think A&Rs work in lots of different ways. But what's your thing?
Everyone works differently. My thing is, I like to sort of fill the gaps.
Okay.
So I like an artist to sort of know what they are, what they want to be, and then I have to identify where their strengths and weaknesses are, and then my job is to let the artist be the artist, and me to sort of create an environment around them that allows them to sort of excel the best way possible. So some artists you need to find that writer person who's going to be their wingman throughout the process.
Right.
Some artists just need a good producer to articulate the sort of things that are going on in their head. Some artists already have that and just need a better a vocal engineer and a mixer just to help them get the best version of themselves. So it's just about sort of finding out where the holes are, how we can sort of elevate what they're doing. Have they explored all the options that they can in terms of a creative that could help them in the space that they're already in, and then just not accepting okay at all at any stage, and really having a back and forth and being open to having a good old wrestling match with a song, but at the same time knowing when to leave it the hell alone.
Yeah, isn't that? Yeah, I always find compromise is very much closely aligned with mediocrity. I'm not a massive fan of compromise. I mean, I had this debate the other day, and I think it's an interesting one for us to have a quick chat about, because I was talking to a band, and I said, mediocrity is like the worst place to be. Compromise is. I actually use the phrase compromise is the death of creativity. Now, that's quite a strong sentence.
It's a very strong sentence.
Well, I was a couple of beers deep, like we was getting loose-lipped. And so I said that, and one of them said, I agree, 100%. I've got a vision. I know what this wants to be. And then the other person in the same band went, but this is why we disagree. I think compromise is vital. And I thought, oh.
Yeah.
Now I'm sitting in the middle. It's like a 3-seater table, right? So I'm here and they're here, and I'm like, I've turned into referee here. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, you started a fight, and you're like, what's going on?
I just wanted to share an opinion, because that's my opinion. I'm not saying it's the right opinion. I'm saying my view is, if you compromise, you're taking lots of ideas and making them slightly shitter. But I don't know what your view
my
is.
My opinion is, I believe in duality. I believe in both. I think you can compromise and you can be singular in your stance. I think the song is king, always, and you've always got to do the best thing for the song. And sometimes a compromise can find a great balance. Sometimes compromise can ruin things, and I don't think you can blanket it at all. I think it's on the scenario and the song and the timing and in the world, and there's loads of nuances around it. I think it's very it's quite impactful to say, but in practice, if you ever put in records up, if you ever had an argument with somebody about their verse or the lyric of their saying, or putting a chorus at the front of a song, or even losing a middle 8 section. When you're having those conversations, it depends whether we're talking about DSPs, when we're talking about radio, or whether we're talking about a song that none of us feel is the focus song yet, or whether it's the thing that we're going to hang our hat on, and if we don't get it right, we're all fucked. Yeah, sort of thing. So I think the situations can be nuances. I think the good A&Rs are the people that can take a view holistically around the broader situation of where the artist is, and then and be decisive in that moment. And sometimes it will mean compromise, but sometimes it will mean absolutely not. Compromise.
Is it about an A&R also having a somewhat objective view of taking on board all of the things, but still having a bit of a vision?
They've got to have a vision. I think that's why seasoned A&Rs do well, because they've been littered with problems along the way of their journey that they've had to solve. And because of that, they're able to sort of make decisive clinical decisions in moments where most people would definitely wobble or be uncertain. So that's where the experience comes in. There's sometimes compromise is the worst thing you could possibly do, because you'd also, as an A&R person, you might have done it 4 years ago and you go, actually, I did that before and this is why it shouldn't work. This is why you can't do that. And sometimes you absolutely have to. Otherwise, there are people that are going to go and promote a song for 6 months and absolutely hate it and not give it their all and not do the content the way they should and not lean in like they should, because there's a bee in their bonnet about it, and they won't even say it. They'll be passively annoyed, and what you'll get is 60% of them rather than 100. And for that alone, that can take away so much of the vim and the sort of like drive of a project that it can actually work against you. Oh,
definitely. You said something really interesting in that as well. You said about context, as in, well, are you talking about DSPs? Are you talking about radio? Are you talking about, all these other factors? TikTok, and that's from an A&R. Again, you can imagine the kind of questions we have at times, and we pitch stuff to A&Rs quite a lot, and some of it we get good feedback, some of it we don't get any feedback at all. But when we're talking to artists, they do sometimes say, well, should we be writing songs for TikTok? It's like, don't think so. No, that wouldn't be my thought. But then they go, well, but what about radio? Like, we can't write a song that's over 3 minutes, apparently, because our radio plugger said that if we do a song that's over 3 minutes, it will never get played. And I'm like, now I've got, obviously, my view from a radio and TV background, and we do digital marketing now, so we've all got views on this. But I'd love to hear your view on that, because that can essentially be a number of presentations of the same song. How do you navigate that?
It's my business. For long as I've been in the business, it's changed every 5 years, 6 years. There was like 3:30 time-wise for a radio edit, or close to 3 minutes as possible. I had a hit a few years ago with Tion Wayne with a song called Body, which is the number one record. It's about 1 minute 52. And it's just at the crossroads of TikTok really sort of having an impact on charts sort of stuff. So what I would say to that is, you need to know who your audience is. If you're in adult contemporary and your audience need a middle-aged section, your song's gonna be 3 minutes. There's no way around it. If you're appealing to a young audience, to kids that are on TikTok, you're looking at 2 minutes, because their attention span is short. And I think it's about identifying your fan base and working around that. And those fan base will tell you whether they fucking listen to it or not. They will have no mercy at all, sort of thing. So if you're asking that question, you probably haven't identified who your audience is.
That's brilliant segue into this next part, and it's a question I asked an A&R a while back, which you'll be able to listen back to. But an A&R I asked, and I said, what comes first here? Is it a brand or is it the music?
I think the brand.
Interesting. And this is why A&Rs are different. He was very, very solid music first, brand after. But I just found it fascinating because, again, this is the point. We work in this amazing industry that's filled with nuance and subjectivity, that's built around reference and values and beliefs and all of this stuff. And there isn't, we're appealing to different types of people.
Yeah, but I think for me, the brand informs the music. I think without the brand, the direction of the music doesn't live anywhere. And I think the brand will help you point your music at something, and the brand will help you not spread bet and be broad. I think a brand forces you to be deliberate, which I think is really important in anything that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think if you're doing the music first without a clear identity and you are meandering through genres, I think it's really hard to pin in an audience without clarity and definition.
Yeah, well, there you go. You've heard it. A&Rs, they definitely are different. But by the way, just for clarity, I'm with you. Because I think in this day and age, we can create songs. There's plenty of great songs that you've never heard. And there's plenty of great songs that are littered on the radio, right? And again, that's a viewpoint. But the brand, for me, is where we always start with our artists. Always. Who are you and who are you talking to?
Yeah.
Because if we don't know that, how can we construct a plan around whether, or give you some great insights to whether that song's right for you? I'm going to try and speak to post-punk rock enthusiasts. Okay, cool. So, okay. But I write really sad songs that are just piano based. Right. Something's wrong here.
Yeah.
There's a perception gap between who you think you are and who you want to appeal to. Some people might go, or actually, what's wrong with that? And again, that's
fine. If you're in the business of major music and building an audience and having commercial success, if that doesn't matter to some people, but to some people it does, then I think you've got to have everyone pulling the same way.
Yeah,
you've got to have whatever army is behind you chasing your music. They've all got to be very clear on what it is. And I think without identity, without brand, without sort of that clear sort of direction, it's really hard. I think we've seen it, especially I suppose in the independent circuit. When you're putting songs out and you're building campaigns, your pluggers, your team will always take the money. You'll have people that will work your record. You can spend money until you're done. Like you can. They'll always take your money, and they'll always say that's great. if you haven't, as an artist, you have to be so responsible for making sure that you're being pointed the right way and that there's absolute clarity around what you are. Otherwise, you just end up spending hand over fist, not seeing any decent results, and just losing a lot of money.
Yeah, well, you can waste a lot of money appealing to the wrong audience, and I think this is where marketing companies like ours, we have to be desperately responsible in this area. And if someone comes, they can have millions of pounds, but if they don't know who their audience is, we can't help you. We can't help you because we're going to send Meta ads completely the wrong way. We're going to send TikTok ads the wrong way, Spotify ads the wrong way.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. We're not serving you well doing that, and and I think that responsibility filters into labels and all sorts of stuff. But really cool. And so in terms of, like, we're going to go on to a little bit of a kind of fun one here, right? So you've had an amazing journey, right? Yeah. I think that's fair to say. We talked about some cool things you've done already, and and I think culturally defining moments. Maybe you're having your own Jackson moment there with N-Dubz to some degree, right? But I want to know a little bit about the pinch me moment for you. Yeah. So in your journey where you've kind of gone, right, Little Rich would have been like, what? Growing up on a Nottingham Forest, council estate, and now I'm here doing this, hanging out with who? What?
The first real, like, what the hell moment was when N-Dubz sold out the O2 Arena.
Right.
Because we'd sold it out. It was rammed to the rack. We did the whole tour was sold out, and I just had a memory of us being at the under 18s nights, that, like, one CD not working and having to sort of burn another one off a laptop because the bit's missing. Two of the microphones being dead, and then passing them around like juggling microphones on stage. And,
brilliant.
And then going to having full-on production, lighting, dancers, pyros, CO2 bursts, merchandise, and going to experience that at, like, up close and personal, and to see every step along the way of that. I remember being so moved at the concert, thinking, wow, this is everything I'd hoped it would be in terms of how it felt, sort of thing. Because you having played an integral role in that process, that was, I think, possibly still today one of the most rewarding things I've ever been a part of. And then I think having a number one with Tion Wayne and that body record in multiple countries, in Australia, in Italy, here, and having an impact globally on something was a real moment for me, a real pinch moment. Knowing in other territories the work that we'd done had really sort of absolutely penetrated their culture and did something which I thought was great. Also pulling together this sort of, we worked on the Elton record earlier this year. I don't know if it probably won't even be out by the time this comes. It might be out by the time this comes.
Well, it's out in 2025, so
but his schedule is crazy. But even working on that and, like, working with all the musicians in terms of booking some of the Red Hot Chili Peppers into Sunset Sounds, and having Pino Pomelo in the studio, having these characters who you've sort of grown up looking at and idolizing in a studio, knowing that you're involved in that in some capacity, even at a distance, even if it's just organizing the budgets and, like, booking them to sort of make sure they turn up on time and negotiating their rates with their manager, being a part of that in any way, it's just that was incredible.
Yeah, well, I mean, a pinch me moment that you enjoy putting budgets together.
I enjoyed that. Also, the Chasing Status stuff as well last year. Yeah, that was wild.
I mean, what?
That was just crazy. I remember being in the pitch with Joe Charrington, because they'd come to the end of their deal within the company that I was at, and I was with Joe Charrington, me, a kid called Ash Dutton, who's a great A&R guy, and another amazing A&R called Ollie Welsh, another young kid, and it's pitching to keep Chase's Status on the label, right, being asked one by one, why should Chase's Status stay here? Go. And you're in a room, and we had no real prep, but we're having to, like, just riff. Right. And getting through that, and just being absolutely honest with the lady that's managing them, who's amazing. Yeah. And at the end of it, sort of closing the deal, getting into Baladan, and then just looking back at how important that moment was. In the process of where it's got to. And how we managed to sort of keep that there at the time. Those sort of things, that was a pinch me moment, because I've seen the effect it's had in the last 12 months. On the world, and it's just been exciting.
It's cool, man. It's really cool. And we often phrase that question as your most rock and roll moment, but is there anyone you've met along the way that you sat next to, maybe at a bar, some sort of, like, swanky industry event, you sat there and gone, okay, That's pretty cool.
Definitely. I've met Jay-Z, and I've met Beyonce at a Beyonce show, and I remember being backstage in the dressing rooms next to them and just being like, what the fuck, this is mad. Yeah, I remember thinking, wow, how the hell did I get here? So I've had that moment. I think we met Justin Bieber not so much, because as much as he's a superstar, he's a young.
Yeah.
Whereas
I met him in two different forms. I met him as the child.
Okay.
Which wasn't.
Yeah. I can imagine interesting.
Yeah. What knobhead. Yeah. And then, but like just a kid. Yeah. Like, it's not his fault, right? He's a kid. And I met him a few years after that when he was a little bit more mature, a bit more together.
Yeah.
Much cooler. That was part of a Kiss Brand thing. But yeah, no, good energy. But yeah.
Yeah, I think Jay-Z and Beyonce for me were the
sort of... I don't know. I've never met the Jigger Man.
That's the highest.
Really. I don't think I could cope. I've got a couple of signed things, but like, oh man, if I met him, it would just blow my mind.
Yeah, yeah. Outside of that, there's not many. You meet loads of people all the time. We go to like Grammys. We go to Grammy events. The Brits.
Yeah.
We've met Taylor. We've met Katy Perry. We've met.
Yeah.
Say we. Me. I've met a lot of artists over the years that are like global stars. But yeah, Jay-Z and Beyonce, I think that's for me.
Yeah.
It was about 10 years ago, and it was like midway through my career. So for me, it was just like it was quite a big deal.
Well, I only met Beyonce once, and I remember being in that room and thinking, this is a bit weird. And
she's shorter than you'd think.
Yeah, they're tiny. Same as Christina Aguilera when I met her. I was like, what? There's nothing of you. You're about 3 foot nothing. It's crazy.
I just thought she'd be tall. In my head, she's just like...
I think in all our heads, Rich, we go, Beyonce is this voluptuous, beautiful goddess, and she walks in. Actually, she's about, 5 foot nothing?
Yeah, like 5'1" or something mad.
Tiny. Her hair's probably bigger than her legs. But so... I mean, brilliant. Like, we can go on about stories all day, and it's been fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about on the industry side. So we're just going to talk a little bit about trends. And are you seeing any emerging trends or technology that you're thinking that's pretty cool? Or wonder where that's going? What's exciting you the most right now?
The AI stuff's interesting. I won't say exciting, but there are lots of AI artists that are coming through. There are characters that are coming through. Obviously, they're just AI; they're not real. That are leaning into like country and pop, and I think it's fascinating that I feel like there's a bit of a race on in the background, very under the radar, away from sort of the A&R world, because that's quite the antithesis of what we do. A lot of us don't want to be anywhere near that, me included.
Yeah. But
I'm seeing a lot of the AI stuff come through. I'm seeing really savvy young people that drive their own content, that are artists. For me, the sort of gone are the days are of an artist that has just a team that organises their schedule and they do digital on this day and then they do content on that day. I think the ones that are all winning for me are these young kids that are driving, that are doing their own edits, that are in their bedroom figuring it out. I think there's a whole generation of kids post-COVID that are super tech savvy, that have taught themselves instruments, and they've managed to find a crossroads between true artistry in terms of instrumentation and musicality and digital understanding.
Yeah.
And there's a whole wave of these young kids, and I think they're the future. This is why the band thing's starting to pop up again, in my opinion. They've all got managed to grapple the internet properly now, and are bringing a bunch of kids with them, sort of thing. So I think it's a really interesting time. But for me, the trends that I'm seeing primarily are the sort of artists that are able to drive their own content and are able to navigate the sort of that process really quickly and easily. So it's not a big thing to them. It's like it's natives.
Yeah, and we talk about digital natives quite a lot, don't we? And like just as an industry, because the younger generation often get a good kicking from us older generation, right? They don't know anything, like we did. Got no attention, all of this, and it's all absolutely nuts, right? And you're right, exactly like we did. They was like, this generation don't care. These guys coming through now, they don't know any different. They've only known having an iPhone attached to the end of their wrist. They only know that. Yeah,
and they've got time on their hands, so they're able to take it to places that we can't imagine.
Yeah. And I guess, like you say, it's great. There's worries in that as well.
Loads of
Let's
worries.
talk about that AI thing, because I've heard some great stories recently around. A lot of this comes from the scalability of a talent, right? And we talked a little bit about difficulty of managing talent earlier.
And the cost of
Imagine just being able to switch talent off. All right, that's a bit annoying now. Actually, I think I'll just switch you off. This AI talent. And I've seen, I don't know how much we can talk about it on here, but we've seen some serious stuff coming. I've been at a few marketing conventions. It doesn't just work in music, by the way. There's lots of this coming in other fields too. Imagine that. Imagine having these completely constructed personalities that are stars. That's pretty crazy to think of a world in 10 years where we don't have a Beyoncé that's a real person. We have an equivalent of Beyoncé that is just a character.
I don't think it will get to that place. I might be wrong. I think it's important that we're walking towards it, because I think I believe there's like a global reset happening, especially within music, where we're going to go down the AI road, and I think we'll get to a point where authenticity and sort of originality, and I think there's going to be a whole analog wave where it's going to go back to like rawness and character and like and beauty and the sort of ugly sort of thing at some point. And I think it's just going to walk down this road for a bit. We'll get to a point, and I think the things that are really coming through that will really penetrate will be authenticity and originality. I think we'll be able to use the AI stuff for promo and stuff like that, but in terms of artists, someone young people committing themselves to things that don't actually exist, I personally don't think we'll get to that point. I might be totally wrong, I probably am. Maybe I'm just a dreamer, but I like to believe that we're on this road of sort of pursuit of AI and stuff like that in order to get back to the start.
I hope so, because it does feel like a fairly terrifying world that you would have these stars that are just pixels essentially on the back end of the computer. It sounds like you. I
think it's a musical cleanse. It's going to get really close to that.
Yeah,
and then it's the same thing that's going on with the majors, with the sort of like merging of labels and downscaling and sort of trying to sort of bring everything back. And it's at the moment it's about business and profitability, but on the side of it, there's a ton of independent record labels with characters that really believe in art, that understand sort of how to develop and are building smaller companies that are going to at some point plug back into the system. And I think it's going to be there's a whole reset.
Isn't it? This is the blessing of our age to some degree, is that we have seen
you've seen the cycle.
We've seen it shrink, we've seen it grow, we've seen it shrink, seen it grow. We had these moments where technology has been the precursor to that, when streaming labels didn't quite understand that, and we saw a whole raft of things. A lot of labels and people being culled, but then this new generation of label execs coming through that are professional, more diverse, more technologically savvy, more creative, and that's what we've got now. Now we're evolving again in the industry, so I guess it's fascinating to see where it ends up. So sort of on the final rung of questions here, but it's been really, really great. I really appreciate you answering these questions, because there's some great stuff on here. So here's a tough one. What is the single hardest thing for an artist going into 2025 and 2025 just generally? What are the new emerging things that artists need to just be absolutely aware of?
For me, the hardest thing about being an artist in the current times is having a point of difference amongst so much noise. With everybody in pursuit of fame and sort of the same space, it's really hard to have anybody with a real point of difference that can carve up a lane of their own sort of thing. So I think the hardest thing right now is being heard and giving people a reason to be heard. With so much music being served to people, with so much saturation at DSPs and broader media, I think the hardest thing right now is to give people a reason to care about you. I know that's a really broad answer, but I think the ones that are, what I'm seeing now, everything that's working at the moment has been coming for a few years. There's very rare anything that's working that's just turned up. I don't know anything in the top 20 or 30.
The strange thing for me has been country music. I mean, that's been
incredible.
I mean, it's been brilliant, because we've been on the precipice of country for the last 30 years. We've had little tiny moments of it, and it's never quite cut through. And in this year and last year, it's gone, okay, it's a thing now. And
it's massive.
It's weird to me to think it hasn't been a thing previously now, because it does make sense. They're great songs.
I think TikTok, the internet has changed that. I think it was so local before, but now there's a whole like global force of people that are pretty much just discovering it. And looking at like a cultural lifestyle, and that are now really feel like it means something to them in other places outside of America. Which I think for the first time ever, in my opinion. And I think It's amazing. I think there's going to be there's been like Latin waves, there's been a K-pop wave, there's country at the moment. There'll be there's an Afrobeat thing that's happening. I think the world is just like doing this at the moment. Everything's just coming closer and closer to each other, sort of thing. So there's going to be, where there's so much choice, every now and then there's the cultural flip in which we all sort of just need just to cleanse our palates to do something new again. And I think country's been around forever, but it still feels in a weird way new to the young generation.
Oh, definitely. And I think you're right. It feels fresh because it hasn't really penetrated this market before. Yeah. And I think there is a fresh take on country as well. It's not quite as stuffy and guitar and yeehaw as it used to be.
You've got like Shabuzi, you've got like even Noah Kahan is Americana stroke country, but you've got these characters. And the good thing about country, and I think what I said about everything else is at the moment, I think is about substance. Country is rooted in songwriting in its purest form, from chord progressions and acoustics sort of building out of. I think the reason why that's penetrating like it is because it's one of the few things of substance that's still around at the moment, and I think people are dying for it. And what we said about AI and everything that's going on, I think people are dying for something real, something honest, something pure, something emotive that they can really sort of hang their hat on.
Yeah, and a USP, as you mentioned, is not easy, right? USP, a unique selling point. Why should be like your style of rap over your style of rap? What's actually different about it? Or your style of country over your style of country? And it's hard, sometimes intangible actually to describe it, and sometimes it's a feeling. Sometimes, as Simon Cowell would call it, it's the X factor or whatever. Rather abstract way of saying there's a star quality there that you can't quite touch, feel, and know. And I guess you and I, we've kind of got it right and wrong over the years, whatever that star quality is. Some artists you think are going to blow up and be the next big thing, and they do okay and dwindle away. But let's talk a little bit about social media. You touched on it a little bit earlier. As an A&R, how much does someone's social media presence affect your decision making over an artist?
It does. Some people say it doesn't. It does. It does affect my decision to a degree. For me, the social media number just means there are some people that are engaged, that care about you, and you've built up this number. There are times when you hear somebody and you see them perform, and you go, I'll figure that a little bit out later. I just think this is so compelling. It's so important that people hear this, because I think people are going to feel like I felt when they sung to me. And that is good, and that can make a difference. If someone has 60,000 followers on Instagram already and is just doing covers and it's written a song or two, it's a really good sign and that's been growing constantly over a 12-month period. Then that matters, because it means that people are listening and are staying and are engaging. So you're building a fan base virtually, and you've managed to be consistent enough to help grow an audience and build. And
what sort of tools do you use to monitor that data? What things do you look at? So I'm an artist, and I've turned up and I've just sent you my demo. Where it's plenty of mixed and mastered tracks. Plus I've had some releases, got a hell of a following. And then you kind of go, okay, right, I've listened to the music, that's cool. Let's have a look at that social. What tools do you use?
Yeah, we look at stuff like save rate on Spotify. We look at, a lot of us use Chartmetric. Yeah. So if we look under the bonnet, we look at the engagement, we look at where the audience is, we look at demographic, we look at the timelines and how they've grown, why they've grown. We look at spikes. We look for events around it to see if something happened, and sort of we'll dive in and have a look at the reasoning and take a view on whether, with our help and with our know-how, we can get it to X. And if we think we can, or someone is already on the way to where we think we'd like to take it, and it complements what we do as a team, then we'll lean in and chase it down. And if we feel like sort of had a spiky moment, and actually we know they were just supporting Justin Bieber that night, and since then, 6 months later, nothing's happened, but they still got 100,000 followers. We'd all go, okay, maybe.
Well, that gets me lovely onto that next point around followers and legitimacy of those followers. And have you ever been duped by someone that said, I've got 1 million followers? And
I say duped.
Dupe's the wrong phrase.
We've seen that. We've seen that, and we'll meet them no matter what happened. We don't do business with anyone we don't meet. We'll sit down. We'll pick it apart. We'll meet the manager, lawyers. We will do this full-on recce on the whole situation with an artist. And normally you can smell it on them. whether it's real or not when you meet them. But generally, and some people just get lucky and have a big moment and a spikes, and then you sort of meet them, you have a conversation about promo, and you realise very quickly that person is not going to be able to see a campaign through, and then you got to take a view. Sort of thing. So there's loads of different ways of doing it, but for us, it's about what we're good at as a team, what the label that we're at, and whether there's a gap for it. And you might be doing really well, but I might already have an artist in that space already. So I don't need to do it. I can't see you beating them, and I put 2 years in, and it's my sign-in. So
that's another thing, is the competitiveness of your existing roster versus
because there's always the carrot in front. As an A&R person, you always want the big hot thing. But I think being disciplined and doubling down on the things that you've got is really important. Roster maintenance. We did a lot of EMI about roster maintenance and making sure we're serving our roster and we're giving them opportunities where we're leaning in so they've got an opportunity to grow properly. Really important. But there's always deals going down. We all love the kill. We all love the kill of like winning a deal, saying F you to the other label and seeing him at the pub later and taking the piss out of him, the other A&R person who lost the deal, and then getting back on the horse again the next week for another scrap on another artist sort of thing.
Nice.
There's a circuit of that. There's a lot of fun in that process. So.
Well, it's good that you go for the kill, and I think like that competitiveness does feel a bit more like Mad Men.
It is. It's war. It's war, but it's like we all know each other.
A&R, it's war.
I know. It sounds so sad.
It's so sad, but it's
true. In our head, we're in some like 300 sort of Sparta sort of zone of like trying to.
Well, I spoke to someone the other day, and they said exactly something that just exactly says what you said there to me, which was they said to me, I said, "What are you looking for?" Like, I've got great artists here. What are you looking for right now? I went, "We want another Chapel Rowan." I was like, "Why? Oh, that's the entire brief."
It's easier said. Yeah, it's better than saying top 5.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It's more specific than top 5.
Yeah,
that some people say. I think they do. Honestly,
what is top 5?
Top 5 OCC. What is it? I don't know.
I don't know what
they want.
What
they want
anymore.
is not to get fired.
Yeah, yeah. What we actually want is not to get fired.
What we want is to like get a contract extended. A promotion. And to be honest, they don't know what it is. What they would really like is something authentic that moves them, that also is commercially viable.
Got it.
That's what you really. That's what we all dream of, having that Coldplay moment. That act that changes